Natalie sat quietly in the reception area, trying to steady her breathing after realizing she had just spoken with Adrian Sullivan, the CEO of Sullivan Global Holdings. He was so normal, she thought. She had expected a powerful CEO to be distant and intimidating. Instead, Adrian had apologized for bumping into her and treated her with genuine respect. "Ms. Natalie Hayes?" A woman in a tailored black suit approached with a welcoming smile. "Hi, I'm Karen Foster from Human Resources. Please come with me." Natalie followed Karen through the sleek office. Employees moved confidently between glass-walled conference rooms, greeting one another with warm smiles. The atmosphere was busy but surprisingly friendly. "This company is beautiful," Natalie admitted. Karen smiled. "Mr. Sullivan believes people do their best work when they enjoy coming to the office." They stopped outside a conference room. "Please have a seat. The interview panel will be with you shortly." Natalie thanked her and sat down, reviewing a few notes in her portfolio. A minute later, the door opened. 3 executives entered the room. Karen introduced them. "This is Mr. Robert Jenkins, Director of Operations. This is Ms. Linda Morales, Chief Financial Officer. And..." Natalie's eyes widened. "Mr. Adrian Sullivan." Adrian took the seat at the center of the table. He smiled politely. "It's nice to see you again, Ms. Hayes." Natalie returned the smile. "You too, sir." The interview began with routine questions. "Natalie," Robert asked, "tell us about yourself." She took a deep breath. "I've spent most of my career in administrative support, customer relations, and financial organization. I enjoy solving problems, keeping projects on track, and helping teams succeed." Linda glanced at her resume. "You took a break from corporate work several years ago." "Yes." "What was the reason?" Natalie hesitated. She could have lied. Instead, she chose honesty. "My husband was completing graduate school. We decided I would work flexible jobs so I could support us financially while he focused on his education." No one spoke for a moment. Adrian simply listened. Linda nodded. "That must have required a great deal of sacrifice." "It did," Natalie replied calmly. "But I believed in building a future together." The interview moved on. Robert slid a folder across the table. "Let's see how you handle pressure." Inside was a mock business scenario. A major client meeting had been scheduled for the same morning as a board presentation. Several executives were out sick, flights had been cancelled due to a storm, and 2 departments were blaming each other for the confusion. "What would you do?" Robert asked. Natalie studied the information for several minutes. Then she began outlining her solution. "First, I'd identify which issues require immediate attention and which can wait." She wrote several notes. "I'd assign a coordinator to communicate with the client every 30 minutes so they know we're actively resolving the situation." She looked at the panel. "I'd move the board presentation to a secure video conference instead of canceling it." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I'd also separate the problem-solving team from the people responsible for assigning blame. During a crisis, finding solutions matters more than finding fault." Robert exchanged an impressed glance with Linda. Adrian remained silent, carefully observing Natalie. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply solving the problem. After another 20 minutes of questions, Karen entered with coffee for everyone. As she handed Adrian his cup, it slipped from her fingers. The hot coffee spilled across the conference table, soaking several important documents. "I'm so sorry," Karen gasped. Before anyone else reacted, Natalie stood. She quickly moved the laptops out of the way, gathered the dry papers, and handed Karen a stack of napkins. "Don't worry," Natalie said kindly. "Accidents happen." Karen looked embarrassed. "Thank you." Within seconds, the table was cleaned, and the meeting continued. Adrian couldn't help smiling. Most candidates would have ignored the situation or looked uncomfortable. Natalie had instinctively stepped in to help. Not because anyone asked her to. Because that's who she was. When the interview ended, Robert shook Natalie's hand. "Thank you for coming." "It was my pleasure." As Natalie walked toward the door, Adrian spoke. "Ms. Hayes." She turned. "I hope we'll be seeing you again very soon." Natalie smiled politely. "I hope so too." After she left the room, silence filled the conference room. Robert was the first to speak. "She's easily the strongest candidate." Linda nodded. "She's intelligent, organized, and composed under pressure." Then both executives looked toward Adrian. The CEO leaned back in his chair. "Offer her the position." Karen blinked. "Immediately?" Adrian smiled. "People with character are harder to find than people with experience." Downstairs, Natalie stepped out of the building, believing she had done her best but unsure whether it would be enough. Her phone rang before she had even reached the parking lot. It was Karen. "Natalie," she said excitedly, "I'd like to officially welcome you to Sullivan Global Holdings." Natalie froze. "Does that mean you got the job?" Tears filled Natalie's eyes. For the first time since her world had fallen apart, a new door had opened. Natalie barely slept that night, but this time it wasn't because of heartbreak. She was excited. For the first time in months, she had something to look forward to. The next morning, she woke before her alarm. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of Aunt Margaret's guest room as she carefully ironed her navy pantsuit and neatly pinned her hair back. Downstairs, Margaret was already making breakfast. "You look like a woman ready to conquer the world," she said with a proud smile. Natalie laughed softly. "I don't know about conquering the world." "Then start with your first day." Margaret placed a small silver necklace on the table. It was a delicate pendant shaped like a tiny feather. "This belonged to your mother." Natalie's eyes widened. "I thought you were keeping it." "I was, until now." Margaret gently clasped it around Natalie's neck. "Your mother always believed this feather brought courage during difficult times." Natalie touched the pendant, her eyes filling with tears. "I'll wear it proudly." An hour later, Natalie stood once again in front of the towering headquarters of Sullivan Global Holdings. Unlike yesterday, she wasn't nervous about an interview. She was nervous because today was the beginning of an entirely new chapter. As she stepped into the lobby, Karen Foster greeted her warmly. "Welcome to the team, Natalie." "Thank you." Karen handed her an employee badge. Seeing her name beneath the company logo made everything suddenly feel real. "I'm actually here," Natalie whispered. Karen smiled. "Let's get you settled." She introduced Natalie to her new coworkers, gave her a tour of the building, and showed her the executive operations department. Everyone seemed welcoming. Everyone. Except one person. A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from her desk before returning to her computer without saying hello. Karen noticed. "That's Melissa Carter." "Is she okay?" Karen gave an awkward smile. "Melissa applied for your position." Natalie immediately understood. By mid-morning, Natalie was reviewing schedules and organizing executive meetings when Melissa walked over carrying a stack of folders. Without warning, she dropped them onto Natalie's desk. "These need to be finished before lunch." Natalie looked at the thick pile. "I thought these belonged to the finance department." "They do." "But..." Melissa interrupted. "We all help each other around here." Then she walked away. Natalie looked around. Several coworkers exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. She took a deep breath. "I'm not going to create conflict on my first day." She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Around noon, Karen rushed into the office looking anxious. "Natalie." Natalie looked up immediately. "What's wrong?" "The executive board meeting has been moved forward by an hour." "Oh." Mr. Sullivan's presentation folders are missing. Everyone froze. The folders disappeared, someone asked. Karen nodded. The meeting starts in 35 minutes. Melissa folded her arms. Well, that's a disaster. Natalie stood. Do we have digital copies? Karen blinked. Yes. Where? On the company server. Natalie smiled. Then we still have time. Without waiting for instructions, she logged into the system, located the presentation files, corrected several formatting errors she noticed, and sent them to the print department with an urgent request. Then she personally organized every folder in the correct order. 28 minutes later. Everything was ready. Karen stared in amazement. I thought we'd never pull this off. Natalie smiled. We're a team. Just then, Adrian Sullivan stepped into the office. He glanced at the neatly arranged presentation folders waiting on the conference table. I heard there was a problem. Karen nodded. There was. Adrian looked at Natalie. And? Karen smiled. Natalie solved it. Adrian turned toward her. You weren't even supposed to know where those files were. Natalie shrugged modestly. I figured someone had to find a solution. A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. Thank you. Before walking away, he paused. Oh, one more thing. Everyone looked at him. Excellent work on your first day. The entire office fell silent. The CEO rarely praised employees publicly. Natalie felt her cheeks grow warm. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. As Adrian disappeared down the hallway, Melissa watched with narrowed eyes. She had wanted that promotion. Now the CEO himself had noticed the woman who got it instead. And deep inside, a spark of jealousy had begun to grow. Natalie had been at Sullivan Global Holdings for just over a week. Every morning, she arrived before most employees, organized the day's schedules, reviewed meeting agendas, and made sure every executive had exactly what they needed before they even asked. Her quiet dedication didn't go unnoticed. One Monday morning, the office buzzed with excitement. Sullivan Global Holdings was preparing to host representatives from one of the largest technology companies in the country. If the meeting went well, it would lead to a multi-million-dollar partnership. The entire executive floor was on edge. Karen hurried toward Natalie's desk. Today's going to be hectic. Natalie smiled. Then let's make sure everything runs smoothly. Just then, Adrian stepped out of his office. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Sullivan, the staff replied. He looked at Natalie. Ms. Hayes, could you join us in the executive conference room? I'd like you to observe today's negotiations. Natalie blinked in surprise. Me? Yes. I'd be honored. Melissa watched the exchange from across the room, her jaw tightening. Why her, she thought bitterly. Inside the executive conference room, Natalie quietly took a seat near the back, ready to take notes. The meeting began perfectly. Introductions were made. Coffee was served. The presentation started. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. The large presentation screen went black. A loud beep echoed through the room before every monitor shut down. The building had lost power. A murmur spread across the room. One of the visiting executives frowned. Is this a common occurrence? No, Adrian answered calmly. Please give us a moment. Karen rushed into the room. Mr. Sullivan, the backup generator isn't responding. Another executive whispered nervously. Our entire presentation is on the server. The visitors exchanged uncertain glances. Natalie looked around the room. Everyone seemed focused on the problem. She focused on the solution. Quietly, she leaned toward Adrian. Mr. Sullivan. He turned. Our printed presentation folders. He looked at her, confused for a second. Then he remembered. The folders she had insisted on preparing, even though everyone had said digital copies would be enough. Natalie smiled. We don't need electricity to continue. Adrian's eyes lit up. Exactly. He stood. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced confidently, technology occasionally fails. He picked up one of the printed folders. Preparation doesn't. He handed copies to every guest. The meeting continued without interruption. For the next hour, Adrian delivered the presentation using the printed materials while Natalie quietly provided charts, financial reports, and additional documents exactly when they were needed. The visitors seemed impressed, not by the setback, but by how professionally Sullivan Global handled it. When the meeting ended, the lead executive shook Adrian's hand. I've attended meetings where a minor technical issue caused complete chaos. He smiled. Your team never lost control. After the visitors left, Adrian remained in the conference room. He looked at Natalie. Those folders. She nodded. I thought it was always good to have a backup. A slow smile spread across his face. Most people prepare for success. He paused. You prepared for problems. Natalie smiled modestly. My father used to say, hope for the best, but always prepare for the unexpected. Adrian chuckled. Your father was a wise man. He was. Karen walked into the room carrying her tablet. I just received an email. She looked at Adrian. The clients have accepted our proposal. The room erupted into smiles. We got the contract, one executive exclaimed. Adrian nodded before turning toward Natalie. I think we know who deserves a great deal of the credit. Natalie immediately shook her head. It was a team effort. Exactly, Adrian replied. And you made the team stronger today. For a brief moment, their eyes met. There was no romance. No flirtation. Only mutual respect. As Natalie left the conference room, she didn't notice Melissa watching from the hallway. Melissa had seen everything. She had seen the CEO thank Natalie. She had seen the admiration in his eyes. And she couldn't stand it. This isn't over, Melissa thought as she quietly walked away. Meanwhile, Adrian stood alone in the conference room, looking at the backup presentation folder still lying on the table. He smiled to himself. Hiring Natalie Hayes had been one of the best decisions he'd made all year. 2 weeks passed, and Natalie quickly became one of the most dependable employees at Sullivan Global Holdings. She never sought attention. She never competed with anyone. She simply arrived early, worked hard, and treated everyone, from the receptionists to the senior executives, with the same kindness and respect. Before long, people across the executive floor began to notice. Has anyone seen the revised meeting schedule? One manager asked one morning. Natalie looked up from her desk. I emailed it 30 minutes ago, and I also placed a printed copy on your desk. The manager checked his inbox and smiled. There it is. Thank you, Natalie. A few desks away, another employee approached her. I'm sorry to bother you, but I can't find the contract for the Denver project. Natalie opened a filing cabinet. Blue folder, second drawer, behind the finance reports. The employee looked where she pointed. There it is. How do you remember where everything is? Natalie laughed softly. I like keeping things organized. Word spread quickly that if anyone had a question, Natalie probably had the answer. That afternoon, Adrian called an executive strategy meeting. Representatives from every department gathered in the boardroom. Natalie wasn't there to participate. She was responsible for organizing the meeting, preparing the documents, and recording the minutes. As everyone settled into their seats, Adrian began. Our competitors are preparing to launch a new logistics platform before the end of the year. He pointed to a chart on the screen. If they succeed, we'll lose valuable market share. The room grew quiet. Robert Jenkins cleared his throat. We could speed up our own launch. The chief financial officer shook her head. We're already working at full capacity. Several ideas were discussed, but none seemed practical. Adrian leaned back in his chair. There has to be another approach. Natalie quietly continued taking notes. As she listened, an idea came to mind. She hesitated. I'm just here to record the meeting, she reminded herself. Still, she couldn't ignore it. Slowly, she raised her hand. The room fell silent. Several executives looked surprised. Adrian smiled encouragingly. Yes, Ms. Hayes? I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn. Go ahead. Natalie stood. I've been listening to everyone's ideas. She walked toward the screen. What if we don't try to beat our competitors to market? The executives exchanged puzzled glances. What do you mean? Adrian asked. We already have something they don't. She pointed to a graph showing the company's strongest clients. Our customer satisfaction scores are among the highest in the industry. She looked around the room. Instead of rushing an unfinished platform, why not strengthen our relationships with existing clients? Robert frowned thoughtfully. Explain. Natalie continued. We could offer early access programs, personalized support, and long-term partnership incentives. She pointed to another chart. If we increase customer loyalty now, our clients will have far less reason to leave when our competitors launch their platform. Silence filled the room. The executives studied the data. Finally, Linda Morales spoke. That would cost significantly less than accelerating development. Robert nodded slowly. And it reduces risk. Adrian looked at Natalie with growing admiration. He turned back to the group. What do the rest of you think? One by one, the executives agreed. It's a smart strategy. It plays to our strengths. We can begin immediately. Adrian smiled. Then that's our plan. He looked at Natalie. Excellent insight. Natalie smiled modestly. I was just trying to help. You did more than that, Adrian replied. You reminded us that the best solution isn't always the most obvious one. Later that afternoon, Adrian stopped by Natalie's desk. I wanted to thank you personally. You already thanked me in the meeting. Some things deserve to be said twice. Natalie smiled. I appreciate that. Adrian handed her a folder. I'd like you to assist Robert on the client loyalty initiative. Natalie's eyes widened. Me? You understand the strategy better than anyone. I've never worked on a project like this before. Adrian smiled confidently. Everyone has a first time. As he walked away, several employees looked at Natalie with newfound respect. Even Melissa couldn't deny the truth anymore. Natalie wasn't earning recognition because of luck. She was earning it because she had the intelligence, composure, and determination to make a difference. And without realizing it, she was becoming someone the entire company could rely on. 3 weeks had passed since Natalie joined Sullivan Global Holdings. The client loyalty initiative she had suggested was already producing results. Several long-term clients had renewed their contracts, and the executives were praising the strategy during meetings. Natalie, however, remained humble. She continued arriving early, staying late when necessary, and treating every task, big or small, with the same level of dedication. One Friday afternoon, Karen approached her desk. Natalie, Mr. Sullivan needs these documents delivered to the Grand Crescent Hotel. He's meeting with investors there, but he had to leave before the final contracts were printed. I can take them. Thank you. The meeting starts in 45 minutes. Natalie carefully placed the contracts into a leather portfolio and drove to the hotel. The Grand Crescent was one of Seattle's most luxurious hotels, with marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and a bustling lobby filled with business executives. As she walked toward the elevators, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Natalie? She stopped in her tracks. Slowly, she turned around. Standing only a few feet away was Brandon. He was dressed in an expensive charcoal suit, laughing with two colleagues. The smile on his face vanished the moment he recognized her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. "You," Brandon finally said. "What are you doing here?" Natalie straightened her shoulders. "I work nearby." He glanced at her professional attire and the Sullivan Global portfolio in her hands. "You got a corporate job?" "Yes." Brandon gave a short laugh. "Good for you." His words sounded polite, but there was disbelief in his eyes. "I never imagined you'd end up back in the corporate world." Natalie simply smiled. Life has a way of surprising us. Before Brandon could respond, another voice interrupted. "Brandon." Vanessa walked across the lobby, wearing a designer dress and carrying several shopping bags. She slipped her arm through Brandon's. "Oh," she said when she noticed Natalie. "I didn't realize you were here." Natalie nodded politely. "Hello, Vanessa." Vanessa looked Natalie up and down, clearly judging her appearance. "I heard you're working again." "I am." "That's nice." There was something condescending in her tone, but Natalie refused to react. Brandon cleared his throat. "So, where exactly are you working?" Natalie looked at the company logo on the portfolio in her hand. "Sullivan Global Holdings." Brandon's eyebrows shot up. "The Sullivan Global?" "Yes." "The company owned by Adrian Sullivan?" Natalie nodded. "I work in executive operations." For the first time since their divorce, Brandon looked genuinely surprised. "That's impressive." Vanessa forced a smile, but Natalie could see the irritation on her face. Before anyone could say another word, the hotel manager hurried over. "Excuse me, Miss Hayes?" "Yes?" "Mr. Sullivan asked me to escort you directly to the executive conference suite. Everyone is waiting." "Thank you." The manager respectfully gestured toward the private elevators reserved for executives. Natalie turned back to Brandon. "I should get going." He nodded slowly. "Of course. Take care of yourself." "You too." Natalie walked away without looking back. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Brandon remained standing in the lobby. He couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Executive operations, at Sullivan Global? He remembered how he had once told Natalie she didn't belong in the corporate world. Now she was working for one of the most respected companies in the country. Vanessa crossed her arms. "She's probably just someone's assistant." Brandon didn't answer. For reasons he couldn't explain, he suddenly felt uneasy. Meanwhile, upstairs, Natalie entered the executive conference suite. Adrian looked up as she arrived. "Perfect timing. I brought the contracts." "Thank you." As he accepted the portfolio, he noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. "Is everything all right?" Natalie smiled gently. "Yes." She wasn't going to let a chance encounter with her past ruin the future she was working so hard to build. And as Adrian watched her walk confidently into the room, he couldn't help but admire her quiet strength even more. Natalie had been with Sullivan Global Holdings for nearly 2 months, and her confidence grew with each passing day. She no longer questioned whether she belonged there. She had earned her place. Her hard work, attention to detail, and calm judgment had made her one of the most dependable members of the executive operations team. One Monday morning, she walked into the office carrying a cup of coffee and was greeted by cheerful smiles. "Morning, Natalie." "Good morning. Congratulations on the Henderson account. The client loved your proposal." "Thank you," Natalie replied modestly. It was a team effort. As she settled at her desk, she noticed Melissa Carter watching her from across the room. Melissa quickly looked away, but the resentment on her face was impossible to miss. Later that morning, Natalie was called to Adrian's office. She knocked gently. "Come in." Adrian looked up from a stack of reports. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes." "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan." He motioned for her to take a seat. I've reviewed the client feedback from the Henderson project. Natalie waited quietly. They specifically mentioned you by name. She looked surprised. They did? They praised your organization, professionalism, and ability to resolve issues before they became problems. Natalie's cheeks warmed. I'm glad I could help. Adrian smiled. You've become an important part of this company in a very short time. Before she could respond, there was another knock at the door. Robert Jenkins entered carrying a folder. Sorry to interrupt. He glanced at Natalie and smiled. I was just telling Adrian that we'd be lost without Ms. Hayes. Natalie laughed softly. I think you'd manage. Robert shook his head. Don't underestimate yourself. Unfortunately, not everyone shared that opinion. Later that afternoon, Natalie entered the employee break room to refill her coffee. She stopped when she heard voices. I heard the CEO personally requested she join the executive meetings. So did I. There has to be more to it. What do you mean? No one gets that much attention unless they're the boss's favorite. The women lowered their voices as Natalie stepped inside. The room fell silent. She poured her coffee without saying a word and quietly walked back to her desk. The comment stung. She had worked tirelessly to earn every opportunity. Now people were whispering as though her achievements had nothing to do with her abilities. That evening, as most employees prepared to leave, Adrian noticed Natalie sitting quietly at her desk. You usually leave by 6. She looked up. I just wanted to finish these reports. He could tell something was bothering her. Walk with me. They headed toward the elevator together. After a few moments of silence, Adrian spoke. Something happened today. Natalie hesitated. It's nothing. If it were nothing, you wouldn't still be thinking about it. She sighed. I overheard some coworkers saying I only receive opportunities because of you. Adrian stopped walking. They actually said that? She nodded. I know I shouldn't let it bother me. It would bother anyone. Natalie looked down. I don't want people thinking I haven't earned my position. Adrian's expression became serious. Look at me. She met his eyes. You earned every assignment. You earned every meeting. And you earned my respect. His voice was calm but firm. If anyone believes otherwise, that's their misunderstanding, not your failure. Natalie felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you. Adrian smiled. Do you know why I keep giving you more responsibility? She shook her head. Because when everyone else sees problems, you look for solutions. He paused. That quality can't be taught. For the first time that day, Natalie smiled. I'll remember that. As the elevator doors opened, Adrian added one final thought. Don't waste your energy trying to silence rumors. Natalie looked at him curiously. Why? He smiled. Success usually does that on its own. Natalie nodded, feeling lighter than she had all afternoon. As she walked out of the building, she realized something important. She couldn't control what people whispered behind her back. But she could control the work she did every single day. And she was determined to let that speak louder than any rumor. The following week, Sullivan Global Holdings hosted its annual Leadership Innovation Workshop, where department heads and senior employees gathered to share ideas for the company's future. Natalie wasn't scheduled to attend. She was responsible for organizing the event, preparing the presentation materials, and making sure every session ran on time. As always, she focused on making everyone else's job easier. By noon, the morning sessions had ended, and employees gathered in the cafeteria for lunch. Natalie carried a salad and found a quiet table near the window. She had barely taken a bite when Adrian walked in. Several employees greeted him as he made his way through the room. To everyone's surprise, he stopped beside Natalie's table. Mind if I join you? Natalie looked up, startled. Not at all, Mr. Sullivan. He smiled. Please, when we're not in meetings, call me Adrian. She hesitated. I'll try. He chuckled. Fair enough. As they ate, the conversation drifted away from work. So, Adrian asked, what did you want to be before you started working in corporate offices? Natalie looked out the window. I used to have a dream. Only one? She smiled. One very big one. What was it? She took a slow breath. I wanted to own a bakery. Adrian looked genuinely interested. A bakery? She nodded. I've loved baking since I was a little girl. My grandmother taught me how to make bread, pies, and cakes. By the time I was 16, neighbors were paying me to bake for birthdays and weddings. That sounds impressive. I even planned to attend culinary school. What happened? Natalie lowered her eyes. Life happened. She smiled sadly. When Brandon was accepted into graduate school, we couldn't afford both of our dreams. So you chose his. I believed we were building a future together. She paused before continuing. I kept telling myself I'd open my bakery later. And later never came. Natalie nodded quietly. There was always another bill, another responsibility, another reason to wait. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Do you still bake? Sometimes. For family? For Aunt Margaret. She says my cinnamon rolls could make anyone forget a bad day. Adrian laughed. I'd like to test that theory someday. Natalie laughed too. I'll hold you to that. Just then, Robert Jenkins walked over. Sorry to interrupt. He looked at Adrian. The afternoon session starts in 10 minutes. We'll be there. Robert smiled at Natalie. By the way, the Henderson clients called again this morning. Natalie looked surprised. They did? They specifically asked that you handle their next project. After Robert walked away, Adrian turned back to her. See? What? You have a gift for earning people's trust. Natalie shrugged. I just treat people the way I'd want to be treated. That's rarer than you think. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Adrian remained in his office reviewing reports. His eyes drifted toward the notebook on his desk where he'd written ideas from the day's workshop. Without thinking, he wrote another line. Ask Natalie more about the bakery idea. He paused. Most people dreamed of becoming wealthy or powerful. Natalie's dream wasn't about fame. It was about creating something that brought joy to others. He admired that. Meanwhile, Natalie arrived at Aunt Margaret's cottage carrying a small paper bag. I brought dessert, she called. Margaret peeked into the kitchen. You baked? Natalie nodded. I haven't done it in a while. She carefully placed warm cinnamon rolls on the table. The sweet aroma filled the house. Margaret took one bite and closed her eyes. Oh, Natalie. What? These are incredible. Natalie smiled. I almost forgot how much I love doing this. Margaret looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe you didn't forget. What do you mean? You were just too busy living someone else's dream to chase your own. Natalie fell silent. Later that night, she opened the notebook titled My New Life. She turned to a blank page and slowly added another goal beneath the others. One day, I will open my own bakery. She smiled as she closed the notebook. For the first time in years. That dream no longer felt impossible. The next morning, Natalie arrived at Sullivan Global Holdings carrying a small box wrapped with a blue ribbon. Inside were the cinnamon rolls she had baked the night before. She hadn't planned to bring them to work. But after seeing the smile on Aunt Margaret's face, she had decided to share them with her coworkers. As she entered the break room, the warm aroma of cinnamon and vanilla quickly caught everyone's attention. Wow, Karen said, looking up from the coffee machine. What smells so amazing? Natalie smiled shyly. I baked a few cinnamon rolls last night. I thought everyone might like one. Within minutes, employees gathered around the table. Melissa hesitated but eventually took one. Robert Jenkins arrived just as Karen handed him a plate. He took one bite and stopped chewing for a moment. Natalie. She looked at him nervously. Yes? These are the best cinnamon rolls I've ever had. Several coworkers nodded in agreement. I was about to say the same thing. You baked these yourself? Natalie laughed. I did. Karen reached for a second one. If you ever leave this company, please open a bakery. The room filled with laughter. Natalie smiled, but deep inside, those words stirred something she had buried for years. A few minutes later, Adrian stepped into the break room. The conversation immediately quieted. Good morning, he greeted everyone. Then he noticed the nearly empty box on the table. What did I miss? Karen grinned. Natalie's homemade cinnamon rolls. Robert held up the last one. You'd better grab this before I do. Adrian smiled and picked it up. He took a bite. For a brief moment, he didn't say anything. Then he looked at Natalie. You made this? She nodded. Yes. He took another bite before speaking. I've eaten pastries in Paris, New York, and Chicago. The room grew silent. And this ranks among the best I've ever tasted. Natalie blinked. You don't have to say that just to be nice. I'm not. He smiled. I'm saying it because it's true. Melissa rolled her eyes and quietly left the room. Later that afternoon, Adrian asked Natalie to stop by his office. She knocked gently. You wanted to see me? Please, come in. She sat across from his desk. Adrian leaned back in his chair. I've been thinking about our conversation the other day. The one about my bakery? He nodded. You lit up when you talked about baking. Natalie smiled faintly. I guess I did. I've noticed something about people over the years. She waited quietly. The things we're truly passionate about change the way we speak. Natalie looked thoughtful. When you discuss company reports, you're professional. He smiled. But when you talk about baking, you become someone completely different. She lowered her eyes. I haven't allowed myself to think about that dream in a long time. Why not? Because dreams don't pay bills. Adrian nodded slowly. Sometimes that's true. He stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the Seattle skyline. But neither does giving up. Natalie remained silent. He turned to face her. Do you know how I started Sullivan Global? She shook her head. I borrowed money from my older brother. You did? I was turned down by 12 banks. Natalie's eyes widened. 12? They all told me my business idea would fail. What made you keep going? Adrian smiled. I believed in it. He walked back to his desk. If I had listened to everyone who doubted me, this company wouldn't exist. Natalie thought about those words. I don't know if I'm brave enough. Adrian looked at her kindly. You don't have to decide today. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a business magazine. On the cover was a headline. America's fastest growing small businesses. He placed it on the desk. Every company in this magazine started with someone who was afraid. Natalie slowly picked it up. You really think I could do something like that? I think you're capable of much more than you believe. His words settled deep in her heart. No one had encouraged her dreams in years. Not since before she married Brandon. As she stood to leave, Adrian added one last thing. Promise me something. She turned. What is it? Don't bury your dream again. Natalie smiled, her eyes shining with renewed hope. I won't. As she walked out of his office, she held the magazine close to her chest. For the first time since her marriage had ended, she wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was beginning to imagine the future she had once been too afraid to chase. The following Monday, Sullivan Global Holdings was buzzing with activity. A major client, Westbridge Retail Group, had requested an emergency strategy meeting after one of its nationwide marketing campaigns failed. Millions of dollars had been invested, but customer engagement had dropped instead of increasing. The company's executives were anxious. If Sullivan Global couldn't provide a solution, Westbridge might take its business elsewhere. At 9 o'clock sharp, the boardroom filled with department heads, analysts, and senior managers. Natalie sat quietly near the back, ready to take notes. Adrian stood at the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Westbridge needs answers by the end of today. Let's hear your ideas. For the next hour, proposals filled the room. We should increase their advertising budget. We need celebrity endorsements. Let's recommend rebranding. Each suggestion sounded impressive, but none addressed the real problem. Adrian crossed his arms. We're treating the symptoms, not the cause. Silence settled over the room. Natalie looked down at the customer feedback reports in front of her. Something caught her attention. She flipped through several pages, comparing survey results with sales figures. The pattern became clear. She hesitated. Should I say something? This wasn't her meeting. These were experienced executives. But the numbers didn't lie. Slowly, she raised her hand. Adrian noticed immediately. Yes, Natalie? She stood. I think the campaign failed because it focused on selling products instead of solving customers' problems. Several executives looked puzzled. What do you mean? Robert asked. Natalie walked toward the presentation screen. She pointed to a chart showing customer comments. Most people aren't complaining about the products. She changed to another slide. They're saying they don't understand why these products are better than cheaper alternatives. She looked around the room. The campaign talks about features. She paused. But customers care about benefits. The room grew quiet. Natalie continued. If we redesign the campaign around real customer stories instead of flashy advertisements, people will connect emotionally with the brand. She clicked to another slide. We can feature families, small business owners, and everyday customers explaining how the products improved their lives. Linda Morales leaned forward. That's actually brilliant. Robert nodded. People remember stories far longer than sales pitches. Another executive added. And it costs less than hiring. Celebrities. Adrian smiled. I think we found our answer. He turned to the room. Does anyone disagree? No one spoke. The decision was unanimous. After the meeting, Adrian personally presented Natalie's strategy to the Westbridge executives through a video conference. 2 days later, the response arrived. Westbridge had approved the entire proposal. Not only were they renewing their contract, they were expanding it. The new agreement was worth nearly $30 million over the next 3 years. Cheers erupted across the executive floor. Karen rushed to Natalie's desk, barely able to contain her excitement. Natalie. What happened? We got the contract. Natalie's face lit up. Really? Karen nodded excitedly. And the client specifically mentioned your presentation. Before Natalie could respond, Adrian stepped out of his office. Could everyone gather for a moment? Employees quickly assembled. Adrian looked around the room before speaking. This victory belongs to everyone. He paused. But every successful team also has people whose ideas change the direction of the game. He turned toward Natalie. Ms. Hayes. Natalie looked surprised. Your insight helped us secure one of the largest contracts we've signed this year. The room broke into applause. Natalie felt her face grow warm. I was only trying to help. And you did. Adrian smiled. You reminded us that listening to customers is just as important as speaking to them. After the applause faded, employees returned to their desks. Melissa remained standing. She watched as several coworkers congratulated Natalie. The praise that once annoyed her was becoming impossible to ignore. Even she had to admit that Natalie wasn't succeeding because of luck. She was succeeding because she had earned it. That evening, Adrian called Natalie into his office. "I have something for you." He handed her a small envelope. Natalie opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. "Never underestimate the value of your ideas. Sometimes, one good idea can change the future of an entire company." She looked up. "Thank you." Adrian smiled. "No, Natalie." He shook his head gently. "Thank you for reminding all of us that great ideas can come from anyone, regardless of their job title." As Natalie left his office, she held the note close to her heart. For years, she had believed her opinions didn't matter. Now, someone she deeply respected had shown her that her voice could make a difference. And for the first time in a very long time, Natalie truly believed in herself. The success of the Westbridge project spread quickly throughout Sullivan Global Holdings. Emails of congratulations poured in from regional offices across the country. The executive team celebrated the new contract, and employees were excited about the opportunities it would bring. Natalie, however, returned to her desk the next morning as if nothing had happened. She answered emails, organized schedules, and prepared meeting materials with the same quiet dedication she had shown since her first day. Karen smiled as she walked past. "You know, most people would still be celebrating." Natalie laughed softly. "The work isn't finished just because one project succeeded." Karen shook her head with admiration. "No wonder Mr. Sullivan trusts you." Later that morning, Adrian was invited to speak at the company's monthly leadership meeting. Managers from every department gathered in the auditorium to hear updates on the company's progress. Natalie was seated near the back, taking notes for the executive team. Adrian stepped onto the stage, and the room fell silent. "I'd like to begin by thanking every employee for your hard work over the past month," he said. A slide appeared on the large screen showing the successful Westbridge contract. "This achievement has already strengthened our position in the market." The audience applauded. Then Adrian continued. "Many people have congratulated me personally for securing this partnership." He paused and looked around the room. "But I can't accept credit that belongs to someone else." Natalie's head slowly lifted. Adrian smiled. "The strategy that convinced Westbridge to renew their contract came from one of our own employees." He turned toward the audience. "Ms. Natalie Hayes, would you please join me on stage?" The entire auditorium erupted into applause. Natalie froze. She looked around, wondering if she had heard correctly. Karen leaned over and whispered, "He's talking about you." With her heart pounding, Natalie stood and slowly walked toward the stage. She had never spoken in front of so many people before. Adrian greeted her with a warm smile. He faced the audience. When Natalie first shared her idea, she wasn't the highest-ranking person in the room. He glanced at her. "But great ideas don't depend on titles." He turned back to the audience. "They depend on courage, preparation, and a willingness to speak up." The applause grew even louder. Natalie's eyes filled with emotion. She had spent years believing her opinions didn't matter. Now, the CEO of one of the country's most respected companies was publicly recognizing her contributions. Adrian handed her a framed certificate. It read, "Outstanding Innovation Award. Presented to Natalie Hayes. For exceptional strategic thinking and dedication to excellence." Natalie accepted it with trembling hands. "Would you like to say a few words?" Adrian asked. She looked out at the hundreds of employees watching her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the microphone. "When I joined this company," she began, "I wasn't sure I belonged here." The room grew quiet. "But every opportunity I've been given has reminded me that hard work, kindness, and believing in yourself can open doors you never imagined." She smiled. "I want to thank everyone who welcomed me, supported me, and encouraged me to keep growing." Her eyes met Adrian's. And thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for believing in me before I fully believed in myself. The audience stood, giving her a standing ovation. After the meeting, employees lined up to congratulate Natalie. You deserved that award. Congratulations. We're proud to have you on the team. Even Melissa approached her. She hesitated before speaking. Congratulations, Natalie. Natalie smiled warmly. Thank you, Melissa. Melissa nodded awkwardly before walking away. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. That afternoon, Adrian stood by the window in his office, watching employees leave the auditorium. Robert Jenkins walked in with a smile. You handled that perfectly. Adrian nodded. It was important. Robert looked curious. Most CEOs would have accepted the praise themselves. Adrian smiled thoughtfully. A good leader doesn't shine by standing in front of everyone. He looked toward the hallway, where Natalie was laughing with her coworkers. A good leader shines by making sure the right people are seen. Robert followed his gaze. I have a feeling Natalie is going to accomplish even bigger things. Adrian smiled. So do I. Neither of them realized just how much Natalie's life was about to change. Far away, Brandon was about to hear news that would make him question the decision he had made just a few months earlier.